and the gate to the oneness of cause and effect is thrown open. Not two and not three, straight ahead runs the way. Our form now being no form, in going and returning we never leave home. Our thought now being no thought, our dancing and songs are the voice of the Dharma. How vast is the heaven of boundless samadhi! How bright and transparent the moonlight of wisdom! What is there outside us? What is there we lack? Nirvana is openly shown to our eyes. This earth where we stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. This is the 7th day of this January 1982 7-day sesshin. And today we will work on a koan, reading from Shibayama's comments on the Mumonkan. This koan is probably the most amazing and controversial of all the koans. It is entitled Nansen Kills a Cat. It appears both in the Mumonkan and also in the Blue Cliff Record. And the koan reads, once the monks of the Eastern Hall and the Western Hall were arguing about a cat. At times we're substituting different words from different translations. There are all kinds of different translations of this koan. When Nansen saw this, he then held up the cat and said, monks, if you can say a word of Zen, I will spare the cat. If you cannot, I will kill it. No monk could answer. Now the translation says, all were silent. Nansen finally killed the cat. In the evening, when Joshu came back, Nansen told him of the incident. Joshu took off his sandals, put them on his head, and walked off. Nansen said, if you had been there, you could have saved the cat. Actually, in the Blue Cliff Record, these are 2 koans. Here it's 1. But they're clearly 2 parts which are not unrelated to each other. Once the monks of the Eastern Hall and the Western Hall were arguing about a cat. When Nansen saw this, he held up the cat and said, if you can say a word, I will spare the cat. If you cannot, I will kill it. No monk answered. Nansen finally killed the cat. In the evening, when Joshu came back, Nansen told him of the incident. Joshu took off his sandals, put them on his head, and walked off. Nansen said, if you had been there, you would have saved the cat. There's also a commentary by Mumon which says, you tell me, what is the meaning of Joshu's putting his sandals on his head? If you can give the turning words on this point, you will see that Nansen's action was not in vain. If you cannot, beware. And Mumon's poem is, had Joshu only been there, he would have taken action. Had he snatched this thought away, Nansen would have begged for his life. It's a collection actually of teishos that Zenkai Shibayama held at Colgate University on the Mumonkan. And this is the teisho on the koan, or excerpts from it, and comments on it. This is a very famous koan in Zen circles, one that has been included in many Zen books because of the unusual story which denies all rational or intellectual approaches. It's therefore extremely difficult for scholars, except those who themselves have gone through Zen training, to understand the koan correctly. In most cases, they interpret it from the standpoint of ethics alone, or from a common sense point of view, since they do not have the authentic Zen eye and experience to grasp the essence. Once more, I should like to point out that koans are Zen masters' sayings and doings in which they have freely and directly expressed their Zen experience. We have to realize that they are fundamentally different from instructions in ethics and common sense. And he is very much dwelling on this ethics. It comes once more in the next paragraph. Actually, this is not even a matter of ethics. One doesn't go around killing cats. It's no real problem in this respect, is it? If we're not aware that koan belong to quite another dimension than the ethical or the prudential and practical activities of men, we shall forever be unable even to glimpse their real significance. Must be careful not to sort of categorize koans as an altogether different thing that has nothing to do with what? With life as we lead it? What is life? And is a koan expressing that, pointing to that? Life in its wholeness. In working on a koan, is one sort of in a little chamber all by oneself with this koan, and then when one leaves this chamber, there is life again. How do I cope with it? This question comes up so frequently, it comes up all the time. What does my practice have to do with everyday life? Can those two merge? Else neither life nor Zen study has any meaning. I'll skip something here and say this does not mean to ignore or defy ethics and common sense, but to be the master of them and make free and lively use of them. What does it mean to be the master of ethics? To master it, to master them. What's that seeing? Seeing what ethics are, how they're formed, constructed, put together, different from different societies, some of them universal. But always something sort of codified, an idea about it, a standard to which one has to live up or from which one digresses and therefore needs punishment of some sort or another. Is there a natural ethics which doesn't need that term at all? Which needs no precepts? Because action is clear. Action is clear because seeing is clear and impartial and unconditioned. Would you like some water? The main figures in this koan are Nansen Fugan and his disciple Joshu Yunen, two great Zen masters who played active leading roles toward the end of the Tang dynasty, 9th and 8th century. Actually, Nansen was a very quiet man, according to what one reads about his earlier years. He studied Buddhism scholarly. He studied the precepts, Vinaya schools, which deal with the rules and regulations of Buddhist and Buddhist monks, Buddhism and Buddhist monks. And then he worked with Baso, who was a great master. And it is said in one book that Nansen was always quiet while lively disputes were going on, lively interchanges, maybe Dharma battle, Dharma combat. Nansen always being quiet. Only at one point raising his voice so loud that everybody else was quiet. After that, which is called enlightenment. He went on a mountain. He lived there for 30 years alone. He cleared the forest, built a hut, and lived there together with woodsmen and farmers. Till finally he was urged to come and teach at the monastery. And he comes up in many koans, and he's not known for fists or sticks or shouts. He talked. The koan is different here. The first half of the koan quite simply states the incident. It is recorded that at the monastery where Nansen was the abbot, there were always hundreds of monks who had come to study under him. One day the monks staying at the eastern hall and the western hall were having dispute about a cat. Koan doesn't tell us what the real issue of the dispute was. There's no way for us to know it today. From the context, it may be inferred that they were engaging in some speculative religious arguments referring to a cat. We don't know. Some other commentator, interpreter says they were arguing over the ownership of the cat. It makes more sense almost. Because monks who are doing this meditation and sitting in ceremonies all the time, in their free time, do they still argue over religious things, whether the cat has Buddha nature or not? I don't know. Must have been quite an argument. And sort of, it's our cat, we found it. We paid for it. No, but we were feeding it. But it sleeps over here. If you really added up the time over here, it's much more often. Likes us better. An argument. Really arguing. Or whether to keep the cat or not. Leaving alone allergies. Some people just don't like cats. They hate them. They're sneaky things. Or they're un-Buddhist. They eat mice. We went through a little bit of that ourselves. And we finally formed a cat committee. Because the argument was going nowhere. It's really very interesting. What is an argument? And I don't mean a benevolent one, but really a hard argument. Where one forgets that there are human beings around and one argues about an issue. And the issue is the important thing, not the issue, but that one is identified with that issue. And much deeper than that, one has to win. Our side has to win. And the other side has to be vanquished. And the fear of humiliation, of losing. So you keep arguing, like grabbing for some straw from drowning in this humiliation of losing. Whenever people are arguing two or more, are they listening to each other, truly listening? It would seem that if there was listening, there could be no argument. One may realize that there's no meeting of the minds, so one drops the issue. One may realize one cannot convince, and one will not convince. Because unless there can be clear seeing on all sides, nothing is gained, only power. Power over people, over issues, over life and death. Observe it. Observe the next time you engage in an argument. What are the ingredients of it? What's all inside that needs to argue? That needs to come out on top, or that is afraid of coming out on the bottom? All these fears and drives, can they come into consciousness? And at the same time, is it all possible to listen to this other person? Not just to his arguments, but to the whole thing, to the whole person. His state of mind, her state of mind. Is there tiredness, irritability? So much is revealed if one looks and listens. Arguing about a cat. A cat is life. Argument has nothing to do with it. You may argue about the cat and never even take a look at it. Nansen happened to come across this dispute. Shibayama, his irresistible compassion as their teacher burst forth to smash up their vain theoretical arguments and open their spiritual eye to the truth of Zen. He seized the cat in one hand, a big knife in the other, and cried out, "You monks, if you can speak a word of Zen, I'll spare the cat. If you cannot, I'll kill it right away." Challenged the monks to the decisive fight. Sometimes it's said, he didn't even have a knife. Where would he have had a knife? But I've read several places that Zen masters did carry knives because they were working in the fields together with the monks. Nansen had done it for 30 years. He was good at it. Cutting bamboo, cutting rice, I don't know what you cut. In the fields, whatever's growing, you need to eat. You have to cut it off to bring it home and peel it. Or to clear the brush for a new patch of land to grow things, you cut down trees. Setting aside the monks at the Nansen monastery, I ask you, says Shibayama, what is the word to save the cat in response to Nansen's demand? The koan is asking for your answer, which would stop Nansen from killing a cat. Here you is this monk, these monks in training in a monastery, all kinds of strict rules, precepts about not killing. The first precept is not to kill, but to cherish all life. And a formidable master, famous all over China, who always asks for your answers and you don't have any. But you think you ought to have them. He expects them, he demands them. You have to bring something, you can't, because you think you ought to bring something. You think you ought. That's what's going on, isn't it? Brought to an intense focus in this situation. They were paralyzed. Dead, nothing stirred, except maybe the heart pounding with fear, or apprehension, or numbness. What's going to happen? What am I supposed to do? Always the I. Commenting on the koan, an old Buddhist said, even Nansen's knife can never kill the fundamental wisdom. It is ever alive even at this very moment, unquote. And Shibayama comments, even though the statement is undoubtedly true, it still smells of religious philosophy. One can even say of sort of justification, justifying this bloody incident. For the term fundamental wisdom is an extremely philosophical expression, which means the fundamental truth that transcends all dualism, which is also a philosophical expression. The fact is, the cat was held up and the knife in the other hand. Say something. What will you do? Master Nansen, Shibayama says, is actually holding up the cat in front of you. He's not inviting you to philosophical discussion or religious argument. If you refer to the fundamental wisdom, he'll demand, show me the cat of the fundamental wisdom right here. And he goes on, be no self, be thoroughly no self. Is that a command? Is it a command one can follow? Somebody says, be no self. Aren't you going to be just as paralyzed? How am I going to do it? There's the I. What is that self that is no self? With no one in command. No one in control. And yet functioning freely and not intimidated. Not intimidated. There may be this conditioning of being intimidated. And yet, can there be freedom from it, even in its presence? As the heart pounds in the throat, the arms and voice shake. That's no obstacle. To step out and grab that cat or whatever. If one has no image of being a rough, tough Zen person who never shakes or shivers, it's the images that are always in the way, aren't they? The ideas, the standards. How should I act? Tell me, how should I act? Who can tell you? Many people do tell you, and then you follow because that's easier. To fit into a pattern. There's some comfort in that. One breathes a little bit easier. On the surface. Shibayama continues, when you really know self, is there a distinction between you and the world? Is there? And if there is, what's in the way? What is the world, anyways? That's already an abstraction, isn't it? It's you and you and you and you everywhere. Here in Ireland and China and Vietnam, Cambodia, on the Golan Heights, Syria, Is there a distinction between you and the world? In your fears, in your longings? And in that inner division which comes from ignorance, not knowing who one is and who the other person is. The other person isn't a Jew or Protestant or Catholic or Buddhist. These are only names and labels which accentuate division. Do you see that? The other person is no other than yourself. When all the clothes are stripped, is there any distinction between you and the cat? That living cat. The way it walks and stops and looks. Every little hair at attention. Meow. Meow. You and Nansen? Any distinction? If there are no images? You and the teacher? Is there a distinction between the cat killed and Nansen the killer? At any cost, Shimayama says, first you have to be actually no self. The word to save the cat will naturally come out of you like lightning. There are seldom truly capable men either in the past or today. Many disciples were there with Nansen, but none of them could speak out to meet their teacher's request. Keeping back his tears, probably Nansen finally killed the cat. We can read from the word finally, with what a bleeding heart he killed it. That's Shibayama's words. In another translation, I find no finally. Roshi says, Yasutani Roshi says, the cat was not killed. It was just a gesture. I find that in no other version either. All other versions say he killed the cat. It's a fact. That's what the koan says. He did. It's also a fact that no one stepped out to prevent it. That's the essence of all wars, isn't it? If there was no one to carry a gun, no one would do it, there would be no wars. But the national pride does get wounded. I could see that on television at the time the Iranians had taken the hostages, these endless interviews with irate Americans who felt it was about time to do something, not be pushed around there. There's so much violence, and there's so much longing for revenge, or so much fear. Fear not to follow. If nobody was afraid not to follow, nobody would go to war. And maybe shot for it. Or not, one doesn't know. So who killed the cat? Shibayama says, be it as it may, Nansen finally killed the cat as a precipitous barrier in this koan, which has to be broken through in actual training and discipline. Master Toen said, what Nansen killed was not only the cat concerned, but cats called Buddhas, cats called patriarchs, are all cut away. Even the Aryashiki, this is the storehouse consciousness, which means our whole consciousness in which everything is stored and recorded since time immemorial, with all its memory traces up to the present. Even that which is their abode, the abode of Buddhas and patriarchs, is completely cut away, and a refreshing wind is blowing throughout. Master Toen, I don't know who he is. What Nansen killed was not only the cat concerned, but cats called Buddhas, cats called patriarchs, are all cut away. Even the storehouse consciousness, which is their abode, is completely cut away, and a refreshing wind is blowing throughout. Actually, this koan is about destruction. Total destruction of something held very dear. Something very precious. Something one is very attached to. This koan deals with destruction, not wanton destruction to satisfy an inner need for violence and brutality. Nansen was about the most mild-mannered of the Zen masters, from taking from his words and the way he talked to people and dialogued with them. There's a danger, obviously, in a koan like this, because we are all so given to imitating. This is a very unique incident. I never heard it repeated. And it is not to be repeated. It doesn't justify anything. It's not a justification. It's something that happened. can one see it? And die with a cat. Later on, Shibayama says the scene of the koan changes. In the evening, Joshu, well known as an outstanding monk under Nansen, came back to the monastery. Because Joshu, well known for, which had not happened at that point, for mu, saying mu when he was asked whether the dog had the Buddha nature or not. This mu meaning no argumentative word, yes or no. It was a response as free as putting the sandals on his head. Came from nowhere. Don't know where it came from. Let me just read you this one other famous koan, which is a dialogue between both Joshu and Nansen. Not the first one. In the first meeting between the two, Nansen was laying down on some kind of a couch. He was resting, or maybe he was ill. And Joshu had wandered from far away, walked in. And Nansen, without getting up, said, "Where do you come from?" And Joshu replied, "From the temple of the holy image." Probably the name of where he had been doing some zazen or training. And Nansen said, "Did you see the holy image?" And Joshu said, "All I'm seeing is a sleeping Buddha." And Nansen said, "Do you have a teacher?" And Joshu said, "The night is very cold and frosty. I bid your reverence good health." Supposed to have been 18 years old, something like that. But in this koan, they've been together for a while, and Joshu asked Nansen, "What is Tao? What is the way?" What is the way? What is mu? Who am I? Or what is this? What is truth? Or what is one mind? Put it any way, which way it grips you most. He said, "What is Tao?" The way in Chinese. And Nansen answered, "Ordinary mind is Tao." And Joshu, "Then should we seek after it? Or direct ourselves toward it?" And Nansen said, "If you try to direct yourself toward it, you go away from it." Joshu continued, "If we don't try, how can we know what is Tao?" And Nansen replied, "Tao does not belong to knowing or to not knowing. Knowing is illusion, not knowing is blankness." Referring here to this blank void where one is stuck in. Feels good. No problems, or else it feels scary. I gotta get out of this. Nansen continues, if you really attain to Tao of no doubt, Tao of no doubt, It's like the great void, so vast and boundless. How then can there be right and wrong in the Tao? At these words, Joshua was suddenly enlightened. Not at the words. He was that. Vast and boundless. No right and wrong. And yet standing on his own 2 feet. Nansen told him what had happened while he was away. Hearing it, Joshua took off his sandal, put it on his head, and walked out of the room without a word. Nansen said, had you been here, the cat would have been saved. Shibayama continues, what's the real meaning of Joshua's putting the sandal on his head? So I always want to know what's the meaning of this. One ponders and ponders this, but it can't be pondered. This whole question of what is the meaning? What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of these 3 red flowers there? If you can't see them, you ask for the meaning. If they're seen, then meaning is irrelevant. That question is irrelevant. Later on, Shibayama says, Master Dogen very aptly said, death, just death all through, complete manifestation. Shibayama continues, when you die, just die. When you just die thoroughly and completely, you will have transcended life and death. Then for the first time, free and creative Zen life and work will be developed. Not it will be developed, it's there. Why talk about the future tense? Where did Joshua's response come from? Absolutely no judgment. No right, no wrong. No preferences, no images. Nothing. Then sandals which belong on the feet can also go on the head. It doesn't matter. There's no fixed point anywhere. And no separation. Because the feet are the head and the head is the feet. If you have no words. Shibayama at another place says, listen to an old master who says, a man passes over the bridge. Lo, the bridge is flowing and the waters are unmoving. The water's unmoving. Nothing moving. Then maybe the bridge starts moving. So firm, so settled, so cemented. So set. Don't take it for granted. Don't take anything for granted. But find out. We'll skip all the Taishang commentary and poem. It's too late. But at the end of this chapter here, there is an interesting poem that Shibayama mentions, and it says, "A frog leaps into the water. With that strength it now floats. There's another version of this poem which says, a frog, no, the pond. A frog jumps in. The sound of the water. The sound of listen. We'll end here for today. The four vows.
All beings without number.
I vow to liberate endless blind passions. I vow to uproot dark gates beyond measure. without